Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming to the second talk in the sponsors track. This is VilDu, design strategy for therapeutic games, therapy and designing games. This will be addressed by Dr. Minero. Before we start our conversation, I would like to spend a moment to thank all of our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, the Unreal Engine, our goal sponsors, MPL, AWS, Glance, and Jungly. Our legacy silver sponsors, that's GameShin, Luxia, and YesNorm. Our bronze sponsors, Quali and Gameon. Our hyper casual track sponsor, Sunday IP Connector. The other sponsor, Succeed Innovation Fund. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Let's have a quick introduction for our speaker today. Give me a second, please. I think I'm facing a... Hello, sorry about that. Yes, let me introduce Dr. Menno van Peltdien, who is a designer, a researcher, and he explores game design in new and weird contexts. Amongst others, he has created games in swimming pools, therapeutic sessions, and forests. By creating games with professionals, students, and non-game developers, Menno builds bridges between industries, disciplines, and people. As a result, he fosters the inclusion of new perspectives and domains into the creative industry of game development. As a chairman of Games for Diversity, Menno tries to improve the representation and inclusion of sociocultural minorities in games by organizing game jams, talks, and informal mixers. He brings people together to inspire and connect on a rich variety of subjects. He sets up industry meetings in Utrecht and organized various conferences and summits. Without further ado, let's invite Dr. Menno to the stage. Hello.
Hello.
I'm going to leave the stage to you. Off you go and enjoy, everybody.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Menno Deen. I'm a researcher and designer in the Netherlands. And today I'm here to talk with you about the game that we created a couple of years ago and that's still being used in therapy called VilDu. But before I start, I might need an introduction of myself to give it a little bit more background. I hope you're seeing the right things. You're not seeing my slides, or are you seeing my presentation? I think that was sort of the thing. All right, so I hope you're seeing my my slides. There you go. So my name is Menno Deen. I'm from the Netherlands. I've been working in games for I think 20 years now, and I've done a lot of things. And most of the people know me from the game jams that I organize, which are really loud. And the game jams that I design are bringing people together to create a game in merely one day or one weekend. We've done games for design jams with researchers, games for diversity jams with all kinds of people to improve the representation and inclusion of social minorities. We've done games for health jams and obviously normal jams too. Also, we as the chairman of Games for Diversity, we organize a kennel parade in the Netherlands, or we are part of the kennel parade. And we show the world that gaming is more than just game developers sitting behind a computer. We're actually a fun bunch of people who'd like to dress up and make the best and coolest party during these kinds of prides. That's me in the Pikachu's costume. And furthermore, I make games in really weird environments. We've been working on these kinds of events called swim games, in which you make games in a swimming pool. There's a big screen there and a camera on top that sort of follows you around, and you can play all sorts of games with it. Lastly, I make games that make people move, or either socially or physically. And in this game, players have to feed an animal cookies. But the animals have a mind of their own, so sometimes they switch to another device, and you have to follow suit physically. So you have to run after your monster to win the game, which results in a lot of running back and forth, and it's actually a lot of fun to play. This is my younger niece and my nephew playing it, and we've played with more than 3,000 children, and they all love it. So if you're looking for a good physical game, contact me here. So basically, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about the affordances of VilDu. And I came up with this grand idea of walking through the idea of what affordances are, how they connect to game culture and game design, and come up with all kinds of, academic talk. But actually not really interested there. What I want to talk to you about is how we make VilDu, how it's being used, and also what we learned from the design process. And that's where it starts. This game is developed for children with that have a sexual abuse background, so it might be a little bit tough sometimes to listen to. I won't shy away from sex words or more intimate words. So if you're not into that, please, mute your microphone or something. Also, this story is really personal to me because it starts when I was 11. And when I was 11 on holiday with my family, I walked into the forest to follow an older man. And I was really excited because, it was really clear that we should do something sexual, and I didn't know what to come. And a bit sort of surprised by the way, of this really weird experiment that it got really, really fast out of hand. In minutes, I lost control. My personal boundaries, they were transgressed in a way I couldn't really understand. And this sort of experiment that started off funny wasn't longer fun or exciting. It was just invasive and rather abusive. I struggled to get free, and luckily I got away. And in this blind panic, I ran back to my family, back to my home. And it took me a while to tell this story to my parents, who were really shocked and afraid. But it also changed my life quite seriously, because it wasn't only one moment, right? It happened a couple of times other. Because these minutes have made a tremendous impact on my life, especially when it comes to intimate situations. Setting my personal boundaries in intimate relationship is extraordinarily hard. Obviously, it's kind of hard to to speak on this in public, not really being able to see everyone. But the thing is, when things like these happen to you, it becomes harder and harder to shy away from this feeling. And I finally talked to friends about it and sort of came out again about my sexual abuse. And talked to psychologists and talked to lots of people, and but that really didn't put things in perspective. But gladly, something helped, and it was a design process. 5 years ago, I was invited to speak on behalf of Games for Diversity at the last summit. It's organized by Patrick Jarnvat and Andreas Hasselager in Copenhagen in a boat. And we talked about all things sex and mature content in video games. And we figured that most of the games and the things that are out there aren't really mature. When they talk about sex, it's a little bit weird. It's not about intimacy. It's just this sort of really flat surface thing that we talk about when we're having sex in video games. So we explored all kinds of different ways of intimacy there. It was a great day with a lot of people talking about all these aspects that makes games so serious and interesting, and how they could connect to sex or intimacy. I figured the the conference was really interesting, but what was more interesting was the game jam that came after. I already told you about game jams. Those are short design sessions in which you create a game from scratch within a specific theme, game direction, whatever. Obviously, the theme this year on this game jam was intimacy and sex. And I wanted to make a game that could help me later on, could have helped me understand my feelings, my insecurities when it came to boundary transgression in intimate relationships. I talked, in order to design something like that, I brought some friends with me. One is a friend of mine. He's got Frank Lips. He's a psychologist in the field of sexual abuse, and he was really, really thrilled to join me and learn about my game world, as he called it. And also, I asked Tim Pelgrim and Paul Beras to accompany me to Copenhagen. They're from a company called Yip Yip. We've done some work together, and I knew them both from my time at Run Serious Games. I invited the three of them because I really cared about their work. I really cared about what they were doing, and I knew they would treat the subject with a lot of care and, more importantly, without any preconceptions. Well, we traveled to Copenhagen, joined the Lost Summit, and we were really thrilled to be part of this, right? On Friday, we started to conceptualize the game, and this resulted in a lot of futile efforts to connect to intimacy and sex and boundary transgressions. It was because most of the decisions there were really diffuse, complex, and intertwined, and that really didn't translate well to really strict game mechanics. However, after 4 hours of brainstorming and prototyping and discussions, I figured, okay, no, this is not going to work. We're still scratching the surface of what's happening. So this is the first time ever I sort of sat down with them and told my whole story from beginning to end. Obviously, I only talked like this part and told this to you, but the whole story is much longer and much more complex than just this one moment. And it was the first time that I chronologically explained this whole story. After 2 hours of just talking, I was actually really tired and a bit scared, like I'm now. But they understood. And it was actually the first time people listened to me that carefully and that I could sort of tell my story from beginning to end. And somehow things fell into place. And what we understood most of it was that we understood better than before what it meant if your boundaries are transgressed in such an intimate level. It's super important that you don't do it, obviously. But the thing is that the boundary transgression sort of shape things in a life and a newfound relationship that I wasn't aware of until I told the whole story. Also, it turned out that not only my story, but also the story of my friends all had some boundary transgression in one way or another on an intimate level. Those moments to them were painful, hard, and sometimes it made them even angry. So their stories were related to mine, with the exception that they were adults when it happened, and I was younger, much younger. Still, the connection and the understanding that these experiences are similar helped us a lot. So everybody was sharing their story, and suddenly this game jam became one of the most intimate and sharing events that I've ever experienced. It was really, really beautiful. But the thing is, like, while opening up to one another and while really getting into the depth of our feelings, our experiences, what happened, what we feel about what happened afterwards, we discovered that it's super, super hard to set boundaries. And talking about these experiences was even harder. We found that we were often searching for the right words to describe our feelings, like finding the right word for your body parts or really fitted the tone of discussion was kind of difficult. More difficult to explain were the activities that we performed. It was hard to be explicit about sexual intercourse and still describe the ambiguity of our feelings, because my experiences were exciting, frightening, sexual, arousing, all at the same time. And it became clear that we needed to present children, and basically ourselves, with a different language. A language that should fit the ambiguity of intimacy. And preferably this language was non-verbal. So we tried to get rid of the words and come back to the action instead. And what's more, we thought that it was extremely important that the education, that we educated children to say stop or time out, and to be able to set their boundaries, to be in control. So it resulted in a game in which children could expose intimate relationship with someone in a non-verbal way, and a strong focus on boundary setting. The game sort of resembles a dress-up game, and there are two screens.
Twee iPads en de ene gebruikt de therapeut en de andere gebruikt het kind. En je kan een kledingstuk uittrekken of kan ook aangeven aan de therapeut van goh, en toen trok hij een t-shirt uit, dat de therapeut het uit kan trekken en dan in gesprek kan komen over wat was dat voor jou?
Als je personage hebt aangeklikt, heb je aan de rand van het spel, je ziet, het zijn prachtige figuurtjes trouwens, ik vind ze echt zo mooi. Er zit een handje aanraken, er zitten geslachtsdelen, er zit een mond. Dus er zitten verschillende onderdelen die je kan aanklikken en daar doe je vervolgens iets mee bij jezelf of bij de ander.
Er zit een stopknop op en daarmee kun je de grens aangeven. Time-out. En dan kun je verder of je stopt. En dat is natuurlijk het moment waarop ik in gesprek ga met een kind.
So basically, the game resembles a typical dress-up game or dress-down game in this particular game. Two characters are positioned on an iPad, and players can perform various actions on the character. By dragging various icons over the player's body or the environment, players can show or do something with someone else. Like the image here, there's an eye there. It means he's looking at the hand or maybe the butt of the woman. In the center of the screen, there's a prominent button saying time out. And when you hit it, the whole game freezes. And only if you want to continue, the person who hit time out should agree to continue. VilDu is basically a rather simple game, or maybe a tool. It helps children and it gives them the opportunity to express their feelings and tell their stories in a non-verbal way. It resembles real-life dolls that are sometimes used in therapy sessions, with a big exception, that strong focus on boundaries. After the game jam, we entered a competition, or we entered the game into a couple of competitions called by the KF Heinfonds, and they gave us a little bit of money to start up with. That money was doubled a couple of times by the Rading, and they invested in the actual development of VilDu. So the 10,000 sort of helped us to start and explain to people that it was really something that needed to be developed further. Now the game is finished and being implemented in therapy sessions of the Rading and others. So far, the game is used in a couple of sessions, and I think the most exemplary case is of an 8-year-old girl. She was mentally challenged and was abused by her neighbor, but she hadn't told the full story yet. And her parents and then were really, really struggling to work with her and to live with her. She didn't sleep in bed anymore, and the parents were super scared that she would be, scarred for life. When prompted whether she had told the full story, she clearly stated not everything, which sort of heightened the fright of the parents. So in the third session, Frank introduced her to VilDu. They played around in the game a couple of times, and then the therapist asked the initial question, what happened to you? What haven't you told us yet? She stared down to the ground and didn't say much. And finally she said, okay, maybe you could show it. That's what Franca suggested. And she said yes. So she used the iPad, and the girl was able to show what happened to her by showing it. And she said, like, he touched me, and then he was doing this, like boom, 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 with his hand. But obviously she didn't have any words from masturbation or self-enjoyment there. And she didn't know what happened. And actually she thought it was kind of funny, kind of weird. And she was afraid she did something wrong. Taking that away, and also taking away the fear that she was penetrated or abused in even more ways than this, sort of relaxed the parents a little bit and helped them to overcome the fear and to start healing. The thing is, like, Frank was really happy with this because he said that normally it would take him 3 weeks to build trust and a vocabulary. And he did it now in only 1 week. He explained that that they first need to trust one another, take away feelings of shame, feelings of guilt and fear. And secondly, they need to develop a shared vocabulary about sexual acts and intimacy. That's a lot of learning, even though you just have to explain what happened to you. So this normally would take 3 weeks, and with VilDu he accomplished it in 10 minutes. So that's a win there. Also, the 8-year-old girl did not know how to explain what happened, but her understanding because her understanding and vocabulary fell short. She literally didn't have the words, and with VilDu, she had. So what did we learn from this whole experience and the use of the game in therapy sessions? We learned 3 things, and I will go through them one by one. Lesson 1 is subtilizing the problem. With subtilizing, I mean that even though the boundary transgression and on such an intimate level may concern you or may not concern you, this doesn't mean to be true. Everyone who has his or her intimate relation everybody who has been in an intimate relationship has his or her boundaries transgressed in one way or another. Tapping into those experiences will help you to design something that connects to that experience. And by subtilizing the problem, I mean to turn someone's therapeutic traumatic experience into something smaller and easy to relate to. This helps you to understand the experience. And it might not do justice to the intensity of the experience, but you do understand the small part of it, and you can build from there. So by subtilizing the problem, especially when you talk about this really big and intense transgression stuff, it might be good to look into yourself, like, how did I feel? What happened? What would happen to me? Or do I have a similar experience that might not have been so intense, but still similar in one way or another? That helps you to identify and to work with it. And even more important, makes you a little bit more personal. Second is create a non-normative space. VilDu is in essence a non-normative game. Everything is possible. You can. We didn't make any preconceptions about what was right or wrong. For example, in VilDu, players can choose any character, from old to young, from male to female. They can engage in basically any type of relationship and intimate play, because the characters are so ambiguous. The game does not stipulate which relationship is healthy or is not healthy. Instead, it suggests that every relationship is okay as long as you both are able to say no. As a result, the game doesn't really demonize the player, but may open up discussion instead. So I think that's an important aspect of the game that we created. We didn't say this is right, this is wrong, and there are a couple of games out there that sort of deal with the issue of intimate relationship and boundary transgression, but they typically say this is right and this is wrong, and you shouldn't go into there, you shouldn't go there. Well, obviously, I knew it, right? I knew I shouldn't follow an older man into the forest, and still I did it. Was that wrong? And because I thought, and that's what I thought it was so wrong that I didn't talk about it for for 8 years. And lastly, a lesson is to design for ambiguity. I think I sort of talked about this a couple of times earlier in this presentation, but even though VilDu is a rather explicit game, you can undress characters until they're fully naked. The action icons are based on physical parameters of characters, so they're already explicit, right? There's a mouth there, there's a hand. That's not much to discuss. However, the use of these icons can have various connotations, which means that it's not the game that explains how to interpret play, it is the player who gives meaning to the interaction. For example, a hand or an arm, like this, can mean stroking the arm or caressing it, but it can also mean slapping it. It's the interaction that changes the behavior that makes the meaning there. This ambiguity in interaction invites players to express what they were doing. They have to tell it still. They can show it, but then sort of have to talk a little bit more. And this helps them in small steps to verbalize what happened to them or what they wanted to occur. Well, I'll just leave this as it is. I think that's basically what I wanted to share. And thank you for your time and appreciation, I think. And now I'm open for questions.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I don't believe any of us were ready for that. So thank you so much for sharing. No, I don't mean that in any other way, but besides like thank you for sharing. It's a very important topic. It's something that everybody, I think a lot of people would tend to avoid just because of the depth of it and the kind of emotions it kind of brings forward. So thank you so much for sharing that. We have quite a few questions. I would like to take a moment to remind everybody to go to the handouts section and also fill out the form while we're doing the conversation here with the questions. The first question is from Mr. Anando Banerjee. What are some of the challenges you faced in designing the game?
Well, first of all, in designing the game was finding that really small thing to relate to. I think the biggest challenge, and that's every time when you're designing a therapeutic game or a game in these kinds of complex problems, is that you try to fix it all. Right? You try like, okay, so the child has problems with hierarchy, it has an authority, it has problems with school, it also has ADHD and maybe be in the autism spectrum somewhere.
Right.
And, it's also sexually abused, but that was within the family, and then because everybody is unique.
Yes.
But that's not true. Not everybody is unique, but everybody deals with a similar aspect in something, and you need to find that really, really, really small thing and design for that, and that for the whole problem. And that's really hard because researchers are, especially therapists, they're used to sort of keep it open and sort of figure things out. Yes. And as a designer, you need a really small thing to design for it. So that's mostly at odds with one another.
Interesting. The next question is by me, but then I'll come back to that later. I've had a lot of questions. It appears that creating serious games like this is completely apart from creating lighter genres like hyper-casual. However, it seems that there is an untapped potential here that we can expose to the wider audience. What is your take on making popular games with therapeutic elements?
I think every game already has some therapeutic elements in it when it touches upon an interesting subject. Mostly those designs are designed to tell the story of the designer themselves, and it would be really interesting to see if we can come up with solutions to share your own stories. I think letters is a great example for that.
I think also, like, if I would like to expand, is intent, right? For you, this came from a very deep connection, and that also means that is the talk or the story that you wanted to share with, right? And so for somebody who Shiva Mukherjee, I think that would be the take. Like, what is it that you want to share maybe, and invite others to kind of join with you on that journey. The next question is, what is the kind of research and process that go into designing games for therapy?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure how to answer that, because it's as I said, like if you design a game, you need an expert. You need an expert at. I think in this particular case, it was a therapy expert, or therapist on sexual abuse. He's seen a lot of children. He's seen a lot of situations. He knows how to deal with it. Has a couple of methods ready to work. But then you need an experienced designer, or actually someone who experienced and went through it. That's an experienced expert, as we call them. You need them on board too to explain their experience and make it more personal and get to more in-depth discussion of it. And then you need a good game designer to figure out and to ask all the stupid questions no one is daring to ask. But it's sharing, and I don't think you can learn this from books. You learn it by making it, and then if you have something, you immediately see it's not worth pursuing. So that's the power of game jamming. I think that you need to come up with something really small, really rapidly.
Right. Yeah.
So design, make it, and iterate, basically.
Golden words, by the way. Have you or are you planning to take the learnings from this experience and apply them to other therapeutic uses that are intended for different audiences? This applies to both the learnings from the game specifically, like how it was used, etc., or to the process of designing it, realizing the challenges around coming up with the right vocabulary, etc.
Yeah, for example, we're now working with osteoarthritis, which is an illness and disease in your bone. And we're talking with a lot of experts in the field. We're talking a lot of experienced experts there too, patients and researchers alike. We've done a couple of game jams. So basically, we use this sort of formula to design our own games. When it comes to therapeutic games in general, we're still figuring out how to get VilDu to the market. We already have a licensing program that sort of deals with the whole subject, but getting it into an institution is it's quite hard, and having people use it is even harder. So we have a huge implementation study finished like a half a year ago. 2 years, a researcher of the University of Utrecht worked to figure out how therapists could use the game in therapy session, which method they could use, when it was best used, and how they could introduce the game to their clients.
Right.
And that implementation study, that's still ongoing. So it came up with a clinical manual, but then still I think like the design is not so hard. Getting it used is the hardest part.
Yeah, makes sense. Have you thought about taking the idea behind VilDu into an educational space where it is used to teach children how to set boundaries and related things? Yeah, like good touch, bad touch. Yes.
Definitely, yeah. The game was introduced in sessions with mentally impaired people, if I say that correctly. The thing is, like, there's a lot of boundary transgressions going on when in these kinds of fields, and we try to use it as a means to start talking and to do some role play there.
Right.
And it works. But it's also kind of scary because you start role-playing between two adults, and then they have the intimate conversation going on, or no, and is it in between an adult and a child, or is it two children together with an adult supervising it? It doesn't really make much sense. But yeah, we wish we could distribute it for free everywhere. But the thing is that's made impossible by Apple, because they don't want any naked children on their App Store.
Right. No, that I understand. I guess it's like providing a tool, and irrespective when it is available to a massive audience that do not or may not understand the value of the tool.
True.
It can be used in a way that is not. I know you meant it sarcastically, but then yes, yeah, I just needed to get that out. But
no, yeah, that's true. But then I feel let people use it the way it shouldn't. At least we help the people who need it.
Yes, yes, I agree.
You can't blame a knife for cutting people, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. There's only one more question from me. What were the kind of conversations you've had to have with people when you were talking about VilDu? Like maybe before development, then versus like after launch?
It was actually kind of interesting. When because as I said, this is a very personal story, and I've represented it like so many times, but every time in a different manner. And when I first started to share it, it was the academic, right? I have a PhD in games and motivation, so I figured, okay, this is the problem, these are the facts, this is the way to go, this is how it works. And then people came to me and they were really, really, really angry that I made a game for children about sex. How did I dare to take away their childhoods? Like, wow, I didn't mean that at all. That was absolutely not the issue here.
Yeah.
And mostly the people that came to me had some experiences themselves, and they were really angry that I wasn't treating it with enough respect, which I found odd. Then I thought, okay, so let's turn it into the real story. And I thought that was really hard. So I first used Marcel, which was a sort of alias for me. So I didn't have to talk about myself. But that opened a lot of discussions about how it felt and what who's the Marcel and what great that you did it for him. And then I felt like a saint, which I wasn't obviously because I was just doing it for myself. I thought, okay, right, this is done. I'm just talk about my own experience here and just be honest. And it's liberating and frightening at the same time to put yourself out there. Yeah. At the same time, it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
It's just shitty, right? So yeah, no, I think the conversation we had, like people were at first really averse to the idea to bring games and sex and children, but mainly that's the main issue. But children do have sex from the age of 6 already, so it's kind of weird that we don't talk about it. And especially when we go to the States, to America and stuff, people are really frightened and they say, "This is really good you're doing. I have a good example for you," and then they come with this sort of weird books or games with a lot of metaphors about sex that doesn't say much. So I think that the main discussion we have with people is about the explicitity of the imagery, and I think that's really besides the point.
Yeah, I think, like you had mentioned, like nobody is comfortable talking about it, although it's completely necessary. It's absolutely necessary if you look at the state of the world. Oh, we have other questions now. Okay. With kids, sometimes they don't share easily or can't find the words to express. Can you share a few examples of how kids' first reaction to the game was, and how did that get them to share and help in the healing process?
Yeah, well, I think the example with the child that I already explained to was really interesting. She started off just playing around, and then they said, okay, this is your neighbor, this is you. What do you want to do? Oh, now I'm going to take off all your clothes. Now you're naked, right? So she was taking control of the situation and also fooling and playing around, picking out what you can do, and she was really giggly. And then obviously it was time for the serious discussion or serious talk. And then they, I don't know, it switched immediately. I was happy enough, if I can say happy, to see the recording of the session. And then she sort of closes up, and then she's okay, well, this and this, and boing, boing, boing. And then slowly the conversation starts. And because Frank is such a gifted therapist, he gets this story out way faster than other therapists do. But the tool really helped. and he has used it multiple times. Also within two brothers who were in a complex, intimate relationships together that wasn't supposed to. So many, and he uses it for victims, but also for not the
perpetrators,
victims.
right?
Yeah, perpetrators is a bit much because actually,
I don't know what else.
it's
Right.
always like the
Gray area, yes.
Yeah, it's a gray area. Sometimes it's just miscommunication,
Right.
but still hurtful. Yeah.
And another question: if you had to develop this game further or add more features and interactions, what would they be?
None.
Okay, then let's move on.
No, the reason why is because we created the small prototype at first, and we brought in a therapist, and they came up with all these ideas to make it more intricate and to even more complex to talk about stuff. But the thing is, you end up with a cockpit of an airplane instead of a cool game. I don't know. Have you ever played Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Yeah.
So did you manage to get the plane from the ground?
No. Let's not talk about that nightmare.
So we didn't want to make a game like that. We wanted to make a game that is as easy and to understand as Mario or whatever. There's one thing in the game that needed to change was we used small texts underneath the icons. We took those away. And there was a meter in which you could express your feelings from 1 to 10, like 10 really happy, 0 really low. And we came up with all kinds of emotions that the character could come up with more emotions, that you have an emotion slider.
Right.
But it's not the game, it's the conversation that counts, and the game is there just to facilitate.
Fantastic. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Our last question for the night. Has VilDu come up during your participation in Pride or interactions with the LGBTQ community? What has the feedback been, if any, coming to this from the realization that child sexual abuse experience can vary across intersections, like orientation, race, etc.?
I don't really understand the question.
The rest of it is mostly, I think, emotion. But has VilDu ever come up during your participation with interactions or with like the LGBTQ community?
I don't know. Yeah, but the thing is, in therapy sessions, there's a lot of different ways to be intimate with one another, and there it comes up. There was a question about intersexuality because we mainly, due to budget reasons, we have a male man, older man. We don't have a male older woman because that seldom happens. Then I asked, can we take away the genitals one way or another to, I don't know, have more of a fluid body? But then they said, like, no, it's too much. Everybody can. The characters are designed as such that they are multicultural. Like they're a little bit sort of colored, but not really. They have aspects from every culture just put into one character.
Right.
Like sometimes you can do too much, and again, it's just a way to facilitate conversation. I think there's a lot there to it naturally is being talked about within the LGBT community.
Right.
But yeah, it's I don't know specifically. No.
I think it's fascinating that you've created something that is not meant to be a visual representation of what is exactly true, but more like an intention of what is happening behind the scenes, and that is the focus, where you talk about the conversations of what is happening. So it's not specifically, does this person look like me, does this person look exactly like my neighbor,
It feels really real. Like we when the game was finished, and obviously we played around with the prototype, but then the full game came out with all the characters in it, and then we put this character there, and then I played the older man touching the younger kid, and it's like, no, don't want to go there. This is too much. I was really frightened to do it. Like, this is our only goals, right? So it feels really weird and really real too.
And I think that's the intention too, to tell that that's wrong or that's right. Yeah.
Well, to not to tell what right or wrong, but just what happened and maybe how you would like to have it occur in the future, or.
Thank you. No, that makes sense. So much to learn. Thank you so much. This was. I don't really know. This was necessary, is I think something that I would like to say. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm going to repeat myself there. Thank you everybody in the chat section for coming up with questions. If you would like,
email me for anything, right? So people can just email me for anything if they like. So
yeah, would you like to share?
How do I share my contacts?
In the public, in discuss and public chat, you can leave your email ID here. You can also hang out after the talk with the audience in the lounge or the lobby. You have
to go, so
yes, yeah, makes sense. Then everybody, please take the time to message Menno, and we will see you later. Please enjoy the rest of the tracks. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Menno, for joining us and having us.
Thank you for
this great presentation. Yes. Well, yes. Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.